Hey guys, on this video I will be talking about the fourth episode of the first series of Tales from the Loop, and episode 4 is called Echosphere. So we're exactly halfway through now. There's 8 episodes, and when I say season 1, I think this might be a one and done. I think I've heard this is like a one-off series, but I guess there's always possibilities. If they get new ideas, they could do a second series, because this has been an interesting mix of anthology but also like ongoing like story as well, because this is a perfect example, because this episode brings like the story full circle almost from the first episode. So it reintroduces the Jonathan Pryce character Russ, who's like basically the guy who runs the loop and invented it. And we once again see his family, his son, played by Paul Snider. Obviously, he's married to Rebecca Hall's character Lynette, who played quite a big part in the first episode, and she's obviously works at like the facility. And so this is quite interesting, this one. It's a different sort of episode in some ways than what we've had in the first 3, because it doesn't really have the same like meaty thematic sort of ideas. It doesn't so much experiment with like the philosophy or the kind of just the science fiction type elements. It does a little bit, it prods at them, but it doesn't really go into as much it's not so much what the episode is about. But it's one of those that it links nicely thematically with what the series up to now has been like looking at and discussing, I guess. And again, it's all very nicely directed, and I think it's interesting, and probably it's intentional. Then this is like halfway through the series now, so episode 4, because it feels like maybe this is an ending of one particular, if not exactly arc, that's not the right word, because they've all felt like individual stories, but obviously we've seen these characters before. But it does sort of feel a little like that, where maybe the second half will be something a bit different, be telling a different story. We'll have to see, but there's actually not that much that goes on plot wise in this episode, which isn't a complaint. So it's always good to see more of Jonathan Pryce anyway, because he is such a good actor. And we see more of him as Russ, and actually Jane Alexandra, another notable name, is playing his wife in this, so we see a fair bit of her. But so Russ, we see him spending time with his son, or not his son, so his grandson Cole, and they're really starting to bond. And one day Russ takes Cole to like this structure, and they go inside, and Russ says, shout hello into it, basically. And Cole does, and there's an echo, obviously, as there would be. But Russ says, that's really good. I can tell you're going to live a long and happy life based on that. So he's telling him that's what this structure does. If you say hello into it, it reveals how long you have left to live and kind of the quality of life. And then there's a nice little reveal, because Cole says, well, you do the same then. And when Russ does it, there's no echo at all. And there's like this deadly silence. And Russ says, I have something to tell you. And we then cut away, and we obviously get the impression of what he's told him, because we then see Cole running away, all frustrated. And of course the news is that Russ is dying. they never actually tell you the disease, but you would assume it's something like cancer or something quite similar. So in the next scene, we see him like giving the news to his family, and they're all around. And what the episode then does is it mirrors like him and Cole really, and I guess that's crucial because you've got them at the two opposite ends of the spectrum, like age-wise. So we really see how this upsets and affects Cole because he's at his age, he's like unfamiliar with the concept of death or knows very little about it. And I think the intriguing twist on it in this episode is then obviously learning about death and dealing with it is just one of those life lessons growing up. But where the science fiction element comes into it in this episode is that because Cole knows about the possibilities and like the technologies that go into like the loop, then he believes then they have the answer to saving Russ's life, to extending it. So it's almost again this cautionary type tale where kind of having all this like unlimited, sort of power, it then leads to people getting kind of scary sort of ideas. And there's certain knock-on effects. There's certain like if you try and fall back on it and just expect it to fix all life's problems, including in this case putting off death or what have you, then it does sort of stop you facing up to reality in the real world. So I think there's definitely a cautionary message in this. But I think, yeah, that's the interesting twist of the episode. Then actually, the way it plays out, it is more of a straightforward drama. This episode is about the two characters and how this like news affects them. So Cole is obviously has to come to terms with the fact that his grandfather is dying and that death is just a reality of life. And it obviously makes him ponder the universe and life and death. Because at one point they have quite a interesting conversation about the afterlife. And so I think in Cole's mind he would feel more like comforted in the knowledge that maybe there is an afterlife and that Russ is going there and that his life will go on there. And it's sort of interesting that then Russ dismisses this idea out of hand. He doesn't believe in the afterlife, and he actually puts up all these different question marks over it that kind of says, yeah, if you think about it logically, this doesn't really make sense. So there is a little bit of like theorizing back and forth there, but yeah, it's good the way they contrast the two characters at their various ages. Where I think Cole, at his age, he just wants to believe in sort of everything, if you like. He just wants to believe then there's unlimited possibilities. And it's this very interesting idea, which I guess you don't always think about, but I suppose when you are a kid, because I think he's like 5, 6 at the most, I think if you're told about death and the idea of it, you would think, well, that's just stupid. I mean, why do we have to die, sort of thing. And there's no logical answer or no logical kind of rationale, especially when you're at that age. But it's sort of interesting, the contrast, as I said, between the two characters, because Russ becomes very sort of very sort of measured about life almost. There's nothing to say that he wasn't anyway, but he becomes very reflective looking back on his life and certain things he regrets. But he does take the whole thing in stride, which is kind of a source of frustration from his son. But there's certain things that he does reflect back on. So there's a scene with the Rebecca Hall character Lynette, where she again works at the facility, and he watches her doing like equations on like the board, and he talks to her in his office at one point, and he says, I'm sorry, I regret not going to your wedding." And she says, "Well, you really didn't think much of me at that point." And I remember something in a previous episode, I can't remember exactly what, but I'm pretty sure there was they mentioned some conflict just because they had different ideas about the loop and what have you, or about this kind of thing. But they make their peace anyway. I think they probably have a long time ago. But he actually gives her, he says, "I've spoken to the board and we've all agreed, and you can take over from me when I'm gone." And she accepts really without thinking. That's become her life ambition. So that's another nice little bow in a way, the fact that at the end of this story, with obviously Russ passing on, then Lynette actually gets to fulfill her dream, which it actually makes me wonder if we might see more of her character in the remaining episodes, just because it might be good to explore what she does now that she's running the loop. But it might not. It might just be then this is a nice way to end her part of the story, because she's finally got the chance that she's wanted all these years. But I wouldn't mind seeing more of her, because again, Rebecca Hall, good actress, and there could be some interesting stuff there. But yeah, I think we see that Russ has had like a fractured relationship with his son, played by Paul Snider, and a lot of that is just to do with him like working ridiculously long hours and him constantly being driven by his work at the Loop, and so he was barely around. And you see there's like one or two scenes with them in this episode where there's just no communication, almost just like a distance. So there's a scene where Russ goes to pick up Cole, and yeah, you can just cut the tension with a knife in that sequence, and you get these scenes where Russ and Cole are just like playing about, and they're just like kind of pretend shooting each other, and the other one reacts. And like the first time you see them do that, when the father picks Cole up, I think you can see it in the dad's face, and he just thinks, yeah, get real, grow up, sort of thing. So definitely get the impression that there's some tension there. But yeah, it definitely does a good job in reflecting the two different approaches and how it like impacts the two characters. And that's what I mean. It's kind of interesting that actually it does end up being more of just a basic down to earth drama than you would expect based on the first three episodes. But it actually works quite nicely. Like it ties in some of the themes well. And we see actually, like before he collapses later in the episode, then Russ has like this image, like at the moment before he collapses, and it's like this image of like a girl from the past, and we actually see him have it again in the hospital, and it's actually quite a disturbing scene because Cole goes to visit him. He's been saying for ages, I want to see him, and they finally let him. And yeah, Russ is obviously in a very bad mental place and just kind of freaks out, doesn't know where he is, and upsets Cole. And we see these images again of the girl, and I think it's meant to be like what his wife when they first met. It's just this very angelic sort of image of her in the rain. So I think that's what it's meant to be, is that whole idea of when you're about to die, you that sort of cliche of the life flashes before you, but then you do look back on your youth, you have an image. So that's kind of what this episode is getting at with Russ, and he does reflect back upon his life and how he has some perspective, and in some ways there's a growth for him, because obviously he's, I think, maybe hasn't been the best father and has been in some ways sort of a flawed character when it comes to his relationship. And so I think that's maybe important with the stuff with him and Cole. But of course, the big stuff with Cole is the fact that he wants to try and reverse this. He doesn't understand, and this just has to happen. So at one point, when the grandfather has been taken into hospital, Cole rushes off to try and stops it, and he's determined to do it. And he goes to the loop, goes to the loop, and he's about to try and do something when his mother catches up with him, and then you see his parents talking to him, and Cole is just insistent, says, well, the technology's here, let's use it to save Grandad. And that's when the mother just explains, well, you have to respect the fact that he didn't build the loop for this. This is not what he intended with the technology, and that dying's just a part of life. And I think over time in the episode, Cole does accept this, and he comes out in a better place. And I think that scene sort of hits it in a nutshell. It's kind of this idea of then, even if you potentially could stop dying, it is a crucial part of life, just as being born is, and it is just a fact of life. And I mean, could maybe spend a whole video going into whether dying is crucial, important, or whatever you want to say, but that scene kind of nails it pretty well. And of course it's kind of a personal thing, because Russ worked on the loop, and he didn't have that in mind for it. And of course, as we've seen in other science fiction shows, there tends to be certain consequences if you bring someone back from the dead, or if you try and mess with fate and them dying. It's not what you should be doing ideally. So as I said, Cole kind of grows over the episode, and it actually ends with him going back to the structure again, shouting hello, and then we get a flashback forward and just see him over his life, so his relationships, him having a family, etc. over the life. And that's kind of how we end, really. So again, a good episode, just a little different, I think, than some of the other episodes, but I think it feels fitting then at the halfway point this has kind of tied stuff together, and we now get the passing of Russ, the inventor, the guy who runs the loop. So yeah, it kind of feels like changing things up a little bit for the last 4 episodes. But yeah, good stuff. Once again, I've really liked this. I think at the moment this is on course to be my favourite show of the year so far. Because I've really liked actually all 4 episodes. I think the first episode was maybe the weakest, and I think at that point I had doubts over, because they're all quite close to an hour, so I wondered if that might feel a bit like stretching it, but I think they only really got better after that. Episode 3, still the best one, I think, but none of the 4 episodes so far have had a weak episode, so that's good. So as long as it stays at least consistent and keeps that quality up for the second half, then yeah, I think this will be my favourite show so far of the year. So good stuff, a nice little gem, and interesting then it's come from Amazon as well, because they're really getting in the game this year. They've had some strong stuff, and you can see them starting to mount a stronger sort of competition with Netflix potentially. But yeah, this has been one of those little gems from them, and fingers crossed it keeps it up to the end of the season. So good stuff again. As I said, that's episode 4 of Tales of the Loop, Ecosphere, and I'll be back soon with episode 5. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below, like and subscribe. You can also get me up on Twitter. I'll put the link in the description, and make sure to ring that bell on YouTube, because it will notify you when there's a new video up on the channel. Just a mention of some other stuff I've been doing recently. I think on the science fiction note, I've also been doing the Upload, which is another series actually from Amazon, Greg Daniels series. So more of a comedy sci-fi. I've done the first 3 episodes of that. Actually wasn't so keen on the last episode, but hopefully it picks up again in episode 4. But I'll see how it goes with that. And speaking of Amazon again, but something a bit different, I recently started their new mini-series, Little Fires Everywhere, starring Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington. Comes adapted from a recent novel, and kind of a mystery slash, I guess, melodrama type thing. And good first episode, I thought. On the whole, I enjoyed it a fair bit. So you can find the first episode review up on the channel as well if you're interested in checking that out. And I'm planning on doing the second episode tomorrow, so look forward to more of that coming soon. But yeah, thanks for listening for now, and I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.